What's up, fellas? It's Ken Sr. I'm here, sadly, to say that the motorcycling world lost another legend this week. A founder of the motorcycling world as we know it today. If the name Super Hunky rings a bell, then you know who I'm talking about. Rick Sieman passed away on December 9th, 4 days ago. I've been learning and following him since the early 70s, over 50 years. Rick Sieman was the founder of Dirt Rider magazine, Dirt Bike magazine, BMX Action, the Crash and Burn Chronicles, and he also spawned many other magazines that followed in his footsteps, like Cycle News and Racer X. Rick died with his family by his side, his son Rick Jr. and his daughter Cindy, who also raced motocross when she was little and went on to become a scuba instructor and a skydiver. Before we get into his accomplishments in motorcycling, which if you know him, you probably know a lot of them already, but he was also a state weightlifting champion. That's why he got the nickname Super Hunky. He was a really strong dude. When he was 120 pounds, he could deadlift 315 pounds. And he was also in the Navy. He served our country in the Navy. Also, another reason, hats off to him for serving our country. But he also was an arm wrestling champion. And one night he was in a bar with a bunch of his friends, and they had a contest. Whoever won the arm wrestling match that they were in would win a pitcher of beer. Well, he won 70 arm wrestling matches in one day. And at the end of the day, he had 70 pitchers of beer that he gave to his beloved motorcycle club, the Dirt Diggers, for the guys to come in and drink for free whenever they wanted to. But a football team came in. Some big dudes from the football team were there for the arm wrestling championship, but they showed up late and it was already over. And they asked who won, and they wanted to arm wrestle him. So Rick said, "All right, who's the strongest in the group?" And they brought over this big dude, like 320 pounds. Rick was probably 200 pounds, 220 at that point, but he was a weightlifter, so he was really strong. And he said the football players had skinny, spindly arms because the football players didn't lift weights back then, and Rick beat him too. If you know Rick, you probably watched the movie on any Sunday, and you've probably read all the magazines I mentioned, and maybe you've heard of Cookie the Wonder Dog. Rick did a bunch of articles on Cookie, who rode on the seat in the gas tank of her owner's Husqvarna in desert races with a piece of carpet holding her on the tank. His articles from the saddle, his editorials were something I read many times, and he would end a lot of the questions in some of his editorials with, "You really should have known." He had a funny, sarcastic way of answering stupid questions. And he had another article called, another editorial column called Don't Ask. And I think he spawned the Mr. Know-It-All column for Rondo Talbot and Rick Cross and some other editorial guys that followed behind him. And he would sarcastically write that his articles were written from the plush, well-lit offices of Dirt Bike magazine. They probably weren't very plush or well-lit, I'm sure. Rick competed in motocross, desert racing, enduros, and hare scrambles. He also competed many times in the Barstow to Vegas, which was one of his favorite races, and also on the Blackwater Enduro. One time he rode a Mako 760, which only produced less than 100 of them, in the Blackwater 100, and there was a 22-mile lap. What he didn't know is that the bike would only go 15 gallons on a tank of gas, so he ran out of gas before he made it back around to the gas stop, and the 760 had so much compression it could not be kick-started. It had to be jump-started. So that's back when men were men. Let me tell you, that's a serious machine. Big 760 two-stroke. I am going to try to, well, I'm not going to try to. I am building a library at the museum where I've collected, I think I have almost every issue of Dirt Rider magazine and Motocross Action. I have over 3,000 magazines and books. And we're actually, surprisingly, the last couple of weeks, we've been putting that together. So I'll show you guys what I'm working on with that when I get back to the museum. But I have a lot of his articles that I've read over the years, starting when I was like 6 years old. Rick was also involved with the land world speed record setting. It was a 1981 KTM 495, and they geared it way up, put a big giant pizza-sized countershaft sprocket on it, and geared it up. A couple other small mods, and it went 123.75 miles an hour. That record is yet to be beat. I think Mike Weir, the KX guru, has got a good shot at beating it. He's been working on it for a couple of years on a modern KX 500, and he's going to try to do it this year, but that record has stood for decades. He also Rick raced a Mako 501 himself in his Dirt Digger events, and he said he had the thing geared up to do 130 miles per hour. I don't know if that was actually confirmed with it, but He said the bikes were pushing serious horsepower, and he had like factory-built motors in them. Everything you could do to them, he had done. Many of us YouTubers and editorialists that still write in magazines to this day owe their careers to the path that Rick blazed. He was the first. If you've heard of Indian Dunes or Saddleback Park, if the names Hodaka, Montesa, Boltacos, Osa, the Elsinore 250, or the Mako ring a bell, then you probably knew Super Hunky. The era of the Combat Wombat, the Dirt Squirt, the Road Toad. If you've ever heard of the Dirt Diggers Motorcycle Club, which he was a lifetime member, also a lifetime member of the AMA, I believe, and he fought for our rights extensively against the borough, the BLM, the Borough of Land Management, that tried to shut down a lot of the races his club competed in. I owe my history of doing motorcycle videos much to what I learned when I was a little kid. I would read his magazines. I didn't sleep much even when I was a kid. I had like a sleeping issue where I'd wake up every night like 1 o'clock in the morning and I couldn't sleep, so I would grab the magazines, and my brother and I shared a room, and I had a little light. I'd sit there and read the magazines and tatter them from cover to cover, and I still have. I ruined mine, but I've collected replacement ones over the years, and I've done over 6,240 motorcycle videos over the last 13 years. So much of what I talk about and my style of describing what was done to the bikes was copied by what I read in the write-ups, and I used to love the motorcycle hop-up articles they do when they would talk about everything they did to, let's say, lay down shocks on a 74 TM100, which is what I had one, or how to hop up a 79 RM100, and what the trick jetting settings were, and how the Terry fork kits work, and which shocks were better, S&W or Works Performance. I read all that stuff, and now I just talk about it. We don't write about it. Actually, I do write about it. In fact, in my notes, I had written down that I actually have written at least a page, a whole full page description of each motorcycle that we have restored, and some of them are 2 or 3 pages if it's a frame up describing what we've done, and that's over 6,000 pages I've written. If you read our eBay ads or follow us, you know, it's not just the videos. I write complete write-ups on every bike we restore. So a lot of that style came from Super Hunky and his team. In fact, I actually spoke to Rick a couple weeks ago. I'd called, his daughter Cindy had messaged me online, and I got back to her, and they were going to do a fundraiser for some of his hospital expenses. And I was talking to him about the books that he called me, and, you know, having him call me was like having one of your childhood heroes or legends call you. So it was pretty much made my whole weekend. I actually got to talk to Rick a couple weeks ago. Rick's writings were influential in my love of dirt bikes and in learning to read, because let's face it, English class didn't really hold my interest very much, and my handwriting sucks. So I've read 1,000 times more motorcycle magazines and books than any other magazine or book, like not even close. So it's definitely formed me and my love for motorcycles very much, and my ability to read and write. As a child, I remember trying to get out of class as soon as possible to go do fun stuff, like go to motorcycle shops and read motorcycle magazines and watch movies like on any Sunday. Rick also invented conversational journalism, where he would write like he was talking to you, like he was talking to a friend. And I try to do that in some of my videos too. I think I learned that from him. And he was known worldwide. He had fans worldwide, all overseas and everywhere. He was a mentor and a teacher to many of us. I never really thought about it, but I think my Real Talk videos are probably spawned off of the editorials that he used to do. The seeds were planted with him 50, 40, 30 years ago. So Rick started it all for me and many others, and he's been called the most influential person ever involved with the dirt bike community. He walked the talk, he fought for our rights, and dedicated his life to the sport. Right up until the end, he actually raced a vintage race when he was 81 a couple years ago. Who remembers food shopping back in the day before beepers, cell phones, and the internet came around, and the only way we had to communicate with the outside world was with writing through snail mail or magazines. First thing I do when I was a little kid is rush over to the magazine section and see if the new dirt bike magazine had come out yet, and I'd read the whole thing by the time we walked around the store. I still do that to this day. So he's also the author of several books, one of them called Monkey Butt, talking about his trials and tribulations in riding off-road. You really should buy that. It should be available online. His writings had a sense of humor. They were funny and insightful. So if you get a chance today, go out and fire up your dirt bike and do a whole shot to celebrate Rick's life. Rick fought long and hard for our rights off-road. And to quote Joe Abate, he said that he's been in court more than John Gotti fighting all the powers that be out there trying to stop us from riding dirt bikes. He's been in federal court many, many times trying to keep our riding areas open. We've all but lost that battle in Connecticut. There's only one spot left here in our state to ride, which is a whole nother story. So thank you, Rick, for teaching me to read and write and for fighting for our rights to keep our riding areas open. Rick and his club, the Dirt Diggers, used to put on a race, a Barstow to Vegas race. They would compete in it. I'm pretty sure they were part of the management of it too, but they would have 3,500 entrants, and 350,000 plus people worldwide would watch the race and read about it in his articles. At one point, he was producing 410,000 copies a month of Dirt Rider magazine back in the 70s. And the BLM, the Borough Management, could not stand watching us have that much fun, so they tried to shut him down. In fact, they did, but not after many lengthy court battle. If you remember the Phantom Duck of the Desert, that was Louis McKee. He was actually an electrician. Him and Super Hunky got together and hired a lawyer, an attorney, and they fought the BLM and paid for it mainly from contributions from other dirt bikers. It's no coincidence. My attorney has just purchased a gas from us. He rides too. He has a gas 700, and his best friend bought one from Junior too. So they took the BLM the case after case in court, and they won every time, but they kept on coming back and suing them, with new claims of like, oh, there's a turtle in the desert that you guys are going to kill. They would try to find ways to shut them down, sued them for a ridiculous amount of money. They didn't know what to do because they kept on losing, so they showed up to try to intimidate Rick and the Phantom Duck. And they showed up with 13 attorneys and 102 witnesses that were against them and said, if you agree not to ride in the desert, we'll drop all the charges that we have against you. They were suing them for $500,000 for each case. And we're asking for the judge to put him in jail for 15 years, saying this was like a federal offense. They said if he didn't agree that they would crush him and drag on forever in court. 7 times went back and forth, and the judge finally got pissed off and said, listen, you guys are going into a neutral room and you're going to figure it out today. So they put him in a room that was actually the FBI conference room. Imagine how intimidating that is. You're a dirt biker, you're Super Hunky, and you got 13 attorneys with 102 witnesses that are trying to shut you down, try to put you in jail for 15 years, but he fought to the bitter end. So Super Hunky called these guys eco freaks, and they were trying to really crush him. So the judge brought him to the stand and said, you're guilty of the charges. So he convicted him of the charges, and he said it's an $850 fine, and that was it. And they already had all the money because all us dirt bikers threw in a little bit of money, so the money wasn't an issue. But they didn't get 15 years in prison, and they didn't get a $500,000 fine. But essentially, the Barstow to Vegas race was completely neutered. From 3,500 entries, they only allowed them to have 50 entries, and no spectator wants to go to a desert race at 50 entries. So that long court battle ended up really shutting down an iconic race and event. Sadly, the motorcycle industry didn't back him up because they didn't want to, be involved with the politics or risk any other issues that the powers that be might have. They didn't want 13 lawyers suing them, so the governing, sanctioning bodies of motorcycle racing across the United States, the different clubs, nobody backed them except for the Dirt Diggers, as far as I know, and the manufacturers wouldn't back them either. They tried to get the manufacturers, the big four, to help him out, and they said they couldn't take anything from him, pictures, videos, any of it. They wouldn't any of it because they didn't want to end up in a legal battle, which is sad because the manufacturers make their money selling motorcycles, and we have no place to ride. We're not going to buy them, right? I wish things were different there. One of the things Super Hunky was known for is his honesty in his editorials. He wasn't swayed by people trying to bribe him or people trying to give him kickbacks or whatever. In his oil test, for example, a bunch of people tried to get him to say their oil was the best, and they had them tested in a laboratory, and it actually was disastrous results for some of the manufacturers, but they reported the truth. They did that with motorcycles too. Super Hunky, there was one of the big four had a bike, and they did a review on it, and they had a picture of a pig next to it and said it was a total pig. And then another one they tested, they said it was a total turtle. So because it sucked in MX, it was a good trail bike, but it wasn't what they wanted. They liked the fast two-stroke. So he pissed off the major manufacturers who pulled their plugs advertising and motocross action. Of course, they came back later because he did some positive reviews on the good bikes, so they got over the initial hurt. But he was honest and fought for our rights. Maybe you remember one of his articles, the great yellow dirt bike truck, the El Camino. That's a cool story. Super Hunky was there for the first year covering the Super Bowl of motocross in 1974 with Jimmy Ellis won on a Can-Am, and Howerton and DeStefano were there. If guys like Gunnar Lindstrom, Dick Mann, Marty Smith, Bob Hanna, Preston Petty, Carl Crank, John Penton. These guys all became household names and legends in main part due to Super Hunky's writings in the magazines that were spawned off the success of Dirt Bike and Dirt Rider magazine. Because remember, there was no internet back then, right? I'm going to do my part to preserve that history because I went to all the local libraries. There's a total of like 6 motorcycle books in the 5 surrounding libraries that we have around here. So I've collected over 3,000, as many hardbound and paper copies I could possibly get, and we're doing it right now. I am putting together a library to save the legacy that Hunky and his counterparts created for us to pass down to the next generation. The Dirt Diggers back in the heyday created a race called the Hopetown Race, where they would have 50,000 spectators for 2 days, or 100,000 spectators would show up, which is more than most AMA Nationals today, I believe. Just huge events. And they would have all different classes, veteran classes, and you had to be in the top 10 in your district. Super Hunky was in the 500 class. He was ranked 4th in District 37 and rode a 450 Mako. And he told the story in the interview he did with Joe Abate last year. And he got the whole shot because John DeSoto coached him to go around the outside because there was 10 rows of bikes, 50 bikes each, and they all were going to bunch up in the middle. So he went around the outside and got the whole shot. So countless stories that he told over the years that are just awesome to read. One of the things Super Hunky said in his last interview that he granted to Joe, was he talked about what's wrong with motorcycling today. And he talked about the cost of motorcycling, how it's gotten so expensive. You could buy a new bike in 75 for $1,000. I punch it into a calculator. In today's dollars, it's $5,600. Well, you can actually, in a new 450, which is the most popular motocross bike, or 250, a 450 is $13,000, like more than double. And the main thing is the cost to rebuild the 4-strokes. The manufacturer's manual for the 4-stroke says rebuild the top end in 30 hours. It costs about $3,000 to do a top end on a 4-stroke, and the average guy can't do it. They got to pay a shop. Whereas any 2-stroke, like his 490 Mako, he would do in 2 to 3 hours. And back in the day, it would cost like, and even today, $150 for a whole top end kit, piston and rings and gaskets. So the cost has gotten out of hand. It's 10 times the cost to rebuild the motor. The rules have been heavily weighed toward the 4-strokes, not because they're better, but they pollute less. And the BLM, everybody else that outlawed 2-strokes, caused the manufacturers to have to invest in 4-stroke technology. The other thing, too, is that Super Hunky, and I agree 100%, motocross has gotten too expensive. The good news is we are a gas dealer. Gas KTM Husqvarna have a new 125 2024 fuel injected that we're selling out the door for $69.95. In fact, we became the number 1 2-stroke 125 dealer in the country, according to the regional sales manager. So we sold more 125 2-strokes than anybody in the USA. Junior has my son Junior and myself and our team, which is pretty cool. $69.95 will get you a new bike just like the good old days, and it's easy to rebuild the top end. You can do it yourself. It's a 2-stroke. So Super Hunky went on to say that, and I agree, that Supercross has gotten to be too dangerous, and it's a huge part of the motocross scene. Supercross scene are kind of tied in the super motocross thing. You have to be good at Supercross to compete. And he actually broke his back in 1979. Super Hunky did. He went 92 feet on a 93-foot triple jump at a press day where he was riding the track on I think on his Mako. So he said it's too dangerous. Doesn't make sense for the average guy. especially a big dude like him that was over 200 pounds, can't really ride motocross that effectively usually. And the average guy, beginner, novice, amateur, has a difficult time making it through, even riding through the whoops, let alone high speed. So the danger, it's not even, Rick called it a jump-a-thon, and it's not motocross. Outdoor motocross still exists at world-class tracks like Unadilla, Southwick, natural terrain sand tracks that are safe. If you fall on sand, not hard pack. So motocross does exist, and guys like Keith Johnson or Rick Johnson are bringing back. They said they're not bringing it back, but because they never left, but they're doing a 2-stroke only day at Southwick to level the playing field where you don't have to ride a 250 against a 450. You'll be riding against bikes you're the same size as yours, because it really isn't fair, the rules. You have to ride a 125 2-stroke against a 250 4-stroke and a 250 2-stroke against a 450 4-stroke. That's a whole nother story. Anyways, so Rick was not only the creator of Dirt Bike Magazine, but also the author of the Monkey Butt book. You should buy that. He's also been inducted into the Hot Shoe Hall of Fame, and 15 times was indicted into the AMA Hall of Fame. I'm sure he will again this year. He loved vintage racing. He said that vintage races today, you go, there's 300 people versus some new bike races. The modern motocross races, local races, you might have 60 spectators. You go to the vintage racing, it's a big scene because it's affordable. You can buy a vintage bike inexpensively, and that's what we specialize in. So I agree 100% like that. So pick up a vintage bike, find a barn find, fix it up, and get out there and do some riding. Super Hunky paved the way for guys like Paul Buckley, who created the Motorsport magazine and probably shot more photos than any motocross photographer alive today. I pretty much guarantee it. So Rick, Godspeed, Rick. Your legacy will live on through us. And as the Phantom Duck of the Desert would say, quack, 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 don't look back. Rest in peace, my friend, and happy holidays, everyone, and God bless America.